I went to 3 different schools actually. So I started off in the culinary industry. I went to Johnson and Wales. I lived in Miami. I'm originally from here.
Okay.
I'm Italian, by the way.
Got it. Okay. Love it. My brother-in-law is Italian, and I think they're some of the most fun people I know.
Yeah, we're pretty animated. We're a little dramatic too. Spend a lot of time around us. I mean, I'm not going to generalize. Not everyone is like that. But yeah, so went to cooking school. Worked at some awesome restaurants in Miami. I worked at like Fountain Blue. Worked with some really great chefs. I mean, I don't really care about labels, but like Michelin star restaurants, you're making all these fancy plates that are just plated beautifully, and it's just really high stress environment. So I did that for a few years. Then I went back to school for psychology.
Nice. Okay.
Yep. I mean, I've been in therapy for more than half of my life, so I was like, I need to do something purposeful.
That's
I
cool.
wanted to do that. But I just didn't want to be in like $250,000 worth of debt at that time.
Sure.
While I simultaneously, I was just looking at all these different food brands that were just popping up in the market. And I was just like, I can go back to school when I'm 35. Like, I just need to jump straight into what I want to do. I didn't necessarily do that. I just worked with a couple of like business owners. They're small business owners. Just really learned how to run a company, right?
Okay.
From all different angles. I worked with basically a couple of mentors, so to speak. One was a family friend, owned a construction company in New York City, which was really boring, and it was really nice because that level of misery like propelled me to do what I'm doing right now.
Sure, I bet, yeah.
Yeah, but on the same token, like I learned so much about just how to deal with other vendors and just how to run a company properly, right? Like I have no formal financial background, but I was around someone that was a CPA, so just received all that knowledge.
I am the biggest proponent of you learn so much more doing it than going to school for it. And I can attest to that. So I feel that.
Yeah. I mean, I left all of those schools.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
I learned more managing like 5 different parcels of real estate that all serve different purposes, and like redoing all of their websites and just putting myself directly into the fire.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
So yeah, I mean, I think that actually helped me gain the confidence to just jump into this, and like with the approach that I'm going to learn as I go. And recently it's just about making sure that I reach out for help, making sure that I connect with the right people in the industry that can actually help me drive this forward, and then work directly with people that have done this before. So
I love that. And let's just keep rolling because this is a great conversation, and I could add an intro at the beginning. But I want to introduce you real quick for the listeners because we just dove right into your background, which I thought was really cool and organic. But Nick Naclerio, the founder of Mli, did I pronounce Mli right? Is that how you say it?
Everyone pronounce that's great.
Okay.
Great way to pronounce it. Yeah.
Love it. Would you just give everyone a quick background? So that's what brought you to today. What is the brand that you just founded and then you're getting off the ground right now?
So Mli is we like to say that our snacks are just like reimagined snacks, and that they have purposeful ingredients that are really good for your health. So we started with cookies. They're low net carb, low sugar cookies with prebiotics that support digestive health with healthy fats. They're not keto, so they're not super high in fats. No gluten, no starches, wheat free, grain free, soy free. They're low glycemic, diabetic friendly. They're all around just like really good for you cookie that actually tastes good. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
No, I love that. And you dove into your background, which obviously like you did have some, I won't say you don't have any like food experience because you were a chef and you worked for a chef and you worked at great restaurants. So you had like that background. Do you think that, had any sort of connection for you wanting to like bring your own product to market, just like you being close to like creating food in itself? I feel like that there is some sort of tie there.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of skipped over a large portion of my life. So ever since I've been working, I've always been in the food industry. So my first job was actually at Carvel, which is like ice cream chain.
Sweet.
And it was sort of the incubator for was going through, and I can tell you the personal story as to why I started this, but yeah, so I worked at Carvel for a couple of years. My uncle, my family, they owned restaurants, so I was always in food. And also being Italian, like you're always around food. So
Sure.
collectively, I've had like 7 or 8 years of being in restaurants, opening new restaurants, working in catering, and I mean not really so much catering, but working with restaurant groups that do that. So yeah, definitely a background in food for sure.
Love it. Love it. And then I always love to ask founders this from like the 0 to 1 concept that we talked about before we started rolling. But like, were you in the job before starting this? Did you just hit a point where you're like, I want to be my own boss, I want to be an entrepreneur, or was it more driven by I want to bring a product like this to market? Like, what was kind of the initial inspiration to want to even make this leap? Because obviously, as we all know, it's a risky leap.
Yeah. I always used to walk around when I was a teenager, and I would say, I'm going to own, even when I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to own multiple businesses. Like just walking around telling like my mom's best friend that when I'm like 7 or 8 years old. And it was always something internally that I wanted to do that. And I actually tried to start this 6 years ago when I was
Oh,
20.
okay.
I didn't really believe in myself at the time. And I didn't think I had the skill set to actually do it. So I've always wanted to start a food business, to be honest
Got
with
it.
you.
Okay.
And
What do you think changed from the first time you tried to start it till now? Was there some pivotal thing that happened that kind of gave you the confidence to want to do this sort of endeavor?
I think it was a general level of frustration with working for other people. I had one of my bosses, the business owner. He told me I could never work for anyone. I had to work
Mm,
for myself, uh, because I just had too strong of a personality to not a personality, but I don't want to call it an opinionated, but I was just driven to always provide my input. And for me, at least, I thought they were valid points, and I wasn't necessarily being, my advice wasn't listened to.
yeah,
So I felt like I needed to do something. And
got it.
then when I got back from that job, I had no idea what to do. When I left that job, I spent like a year and a half there, in Miami, just managing so many different things. Just I don't even want to get into it, but came here, and then my best friends asked me to go to Italy for a couple of weeks with their family, and they're both business owners. So one owns a real estate photography business that has just expanded, and he's creating an app right now.
Cool.
So just main influencing factor in my life.
Hmm.
And so anyway, I went to Italy, and I was applying for positions to be an executive assistant, and they were just looking at me, and they were like, you should not do that. Like that's not going to be the right fit. Stop limiting yourself. Like really stop limiting yourself. So one of them actually gave me the job in their construction company, working, in operations, just managing the company. And he funded the beginning exploration of the recipe testing.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, so I took about 2 months off, and I just went crazy and stopped talking to people. And I spent all day just developing recipes and teaching myself food science so that I could understand shelf life, and just bought a lot of cookies and asked myself, how can we be different? Like
Got it. Oh, I love that.
how
That's
can I
cool.
how can I go about this in like a foolproof way where I minimize any risk of failing? So between the branding and the integrity of and the formulation of the product itself, I asked myself, how could I not fail?
Love that. Were you just like at home? I'm envisioning you like in your kitchen or wherever, your parents' kitchen, wherever you were at the time, and just like having just a ton of cookies of all kinds of brands around you.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even tell you how many. It's sad, but all the ingredients that I threw out. I was working on the 30th floor of an apartment building in Manhattan. Just this really small studio, like
Okay.
800 square feet, just cranking out cookies every day. And then whenever I was done with the batch, I would go share it with like 10 or 20 people, and I'd say, "What do you think about this? What do you think about that?" And I actually had like a file bin of cookies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just like pulling them, like anxiously pulling them. Like, what do I need to work on next? And then contacting preservative companies, and then just figuring out what do I need to do to get this tested. So it was a fun time. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was.
Well, and
Yeah.
so you said you took 2 months off. So did you just like save up some money? This is like something that everyone has a different story about. Did you like you fully quit work and were like, I'm just gonna spend 2 months no income and just crank this out, or were you working full time and doing something on the side? How did you kind of make the pivot full time?
No, I was living off of credit cards,
Oh wow.
to
Okay.
be honest with you. Unfortunately, I mean, I was already the jobs that I had prior when I was working. I was learning so much that I don't think I asked for too much in terms of salary, so I wasn't in a great financial position. Um, so yeah, well, I started working for my friend, and he was just throwing me a bone like here and there when I was doing what I was doing.
Okay.
But most of it was just like it was like a leap of faith. It was definitely nerve wracking.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
But
Well, how long did you know what your runway was? Like how long did you know you could just, use credit cards to live off of before that
well,
became an issue?
it wasn't really too. He was funding the ingredients, right?
Okay.
Like
Okay. Got it.
actually, so I, but it was just basic living expenses, which I
Sure.
basically had none at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Love it. No, no, no. It's interesting, right? Because everyone's
So
got a little bit different perspective on how they make the jump. So and when was this? Give everyone a little timeline of when you started doing the cookie development. How long ago was this?
yeah, so I started in 2019. I started in September of or August of 2019, and I did the 2 months of really heavy like deep recipe testing at that point. And then I started working a full time job starting in October, November. That's
Got it.
when I just realized that I needed to start making money.
Yeah.
Um, but I simultaneously didn't want to suffocate what I was doing, so I was working like 7 days a week, just living on caffeine for. So anyway, 2019 developed the recipe for 2020. Wow. Yeah. I spent basically 6 months developing the recipe, and then about a year and a half actually finalizing the recipe. So I just kept changing it over and over again.
I mean,
Um,
that goes to show too how much energy went into this to like come to market with something thoughtful,
yeah,
differentiated. Like that doesn't just happen overnight.
no, it doesn't. And I had to keep testing and making improvements, right? Like each ingredient always like it always changes something.
Sure.
And I wanted these cookies to taste as close as possible to normal cookies so that a person can eat them and they're like, wow, this doesn't taste like cardboard or
Love it.
like
Yeah.
an off flavor. Or this has an aftertaste. There's a and I think what I've learned recently is that product development never stops. So we're working on the next stage. How do we make this better? We have a couple of things that we're working on to just make the product better than what it is right now. So
Got it. Yeah, yeah. So you spend, a good chunk of time developing the product. And then how long did it take to, bring the first product to market? Where did you launch? What did that all look like?
yeah, so 2019 developed the recipe for that period of time. 2020 in November, October is when uh, we started fundraising,
Okay.
and we actually launched in late March of 2021.
Love it. And
So
then
I started.
sorry,
Uh,
go ahead.
I don't know. I was just saying we were working on brand identity, and just sort of putting the team together and just waiting for packaging to come in and basically doing everything. I was still leaving the other job. I had to gradually leave that one. So
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And what was it like? I think one thing that I'm sure becomes overwhelming is like branding, packaging design. Did you do a lot of that yourself? Did you, outsource that to a firm? Like, how did you even like think through some of that? I think a lot of people don't realize how much time, energy, and really like creativity has to go into coming up with a name, packaging, just brand identity.
yeah, I came up with all of it on my own. Actually,
Love it.
like
Okay.
I only had like this amount of money to spend on branding and packaging, and I just that was basically like the only chance that I had to actually make something valuable. So I hired a like consultant and I spoke with her once a week, and we just spoke about what I wanted in the packaging. So I just looked at my inspirations and then created mood boards and storyboards and just let that sort of seep in for a little bit to figure out what do I really want out of this. Then I found an illustrator, and I found a freelance graphic designer that worked for an agency in LA, so an illustrator in Berlin. And I just basically told them, we have a product that we want it to be disruptive. And I told them sort of like what I was dreaming about.
Yeah.
Create characters and create like something that like we were also going through COVID too. So we were talking about like, you need to reimagine life to an extent when you're stuck in your house.
Yeah.
So all of the characters actually they represent like a different emotion. So like one is balancing, one is spreading joy, another one is just hanging from a cloud, like they're dreaming. So I just really wanted to create something that shocks people to an extent.
Okay. Yeah.
So she pitched all of her ideas. Like she did a couple of initial drawings, and we went with those ones. So
Love it. I mean,
but
that's a wild process. You know what I mean? Just in general, like trying to find all that. I don't think most people realize the amount
no,
of
and
time, energy, and work.
it takes a lot of time to really create something. Like I went through probably like 15 different revisions of the packaging. I would go to the store, I would print out like what is the packaging, 3 different options.
Wow.
And then I asked way too many people for advice. But
No,
and
but
then
that's
eventually,
great, right? I mean, that's that. I think sometimes that's probably the key that we haven't talked on the podcast a ton about, but reaching out and connecting with other people who have done it. People love helping people, especially in the food industry. I'm sure you've noticed that. I feel like the CPG space is just full of great people who are all willing to help each other. It's pretty cool.
yeah, everyone was super, super helpful. And I continue to learn that every day. Like
Yeah.
the, I never thought that people would actually, and I'm here. I was there. They're like offering advisory agreements with people, and they're like, no, like let's just like take things slow and learn with it, like see how this rolls. Just because I mean the way I approach things is, if you're giving me something, I want to make sure that there's that like that level of reciprocity. So
Sure. Yeah. No, I get that. I get that too. Because otherwise you feel like you're just asking people for free advice, which,
yeah,
that gets
and I
tough too.
don't want, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't,
No, I get that 100%, man.
actually
So
help
interesting. So now you have packaging, and you're about to come to market really after a lot of really hard work. It sounds like lots of, tinkering, getting packaging, getting the cookies in a good spot. What was that process like as you like get all that pulled together? Um, and you're about to launch. And I guess before I even ask this question, I'll back up because you did mention too in that year of really figuring out the process, figuring out the cookie, mixes and everything, raising capital. So I think that's obviously a huge one. What was the kind of some of the thought behind raising capital versus bootstrapping? And do you remember kind of just like the thought process of how you went about that?
What was the thought process behind raising capital?
And really what I'm asking there is, for some people I've talked to on here, it was a need, right? It was just like, the cash wasn't there. And so in order to like innovate and bring things to market like they wanted to, other people, it's been, some people think it's like it's going to help drive a ton of growth in avenues that they wouldn't have been able to do without funding. Just more of a general question, as you were thinking about starting a business, whether that's advice or talking to
Yeah,
people. I think it's really interesting because the one thing I think it's been very apparent on the podcast is there's no one right way to do it.
no, there's not. In terms of raising capital in the beginning, I mean, we got what we got, so we were willing to do whatever we could do to make sure that things, got off the ground smoothly. So, I mean, we approached the situation from like we're just going to take what we get and ride with it. So if we can't do ad spends, we can't do ad spends. If we can't spend money on this and we can't spend money on this, like we just need to make sure that we're doing what we can with what we have. And then shortly after, I realized how much you need to get things moving. And then now I think the biggest learning lesson that I've had in terms of funding, like we have our pre-seed round open right now. We've been able to raise like 2/3 of that. So we've been able to raise 200 grand of the
Awesome.
300 that we've raised. but I'm approaching investment a little bit differently now, in that we don't necessarily need, I think I learned from my experience starting the brand that we don't need, $5,000 for an agency every month. Like, there are ways to
Sure.
go about things. You don't necessarily need to have all of these moving parts working at the same time. Like, you can also just ask investors for help. And I think especially in this industry, asking investor, instead of asking for money, I've learned asking for help moves things forward. Because, and not only asking for help, but finding investors that are in the space because they already have pre-existing connections.
Yeah, sure.
In food, because they know people that have done it before. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, definitely 100%. And you made a good point, right? I mean, I think some people go to raise money because they feel like it's the next thing like, it's like the thing they've heard they need to do next, right? You get to a point and then like, oh, I need to go raise money. But it's interesting to hear that's not necessarily why you did it. And there's a lot more to unpack there. And it sounds like you're learning a lot as far as asking questions.
Yeah.
That's something I've had to learn. And I think this podcast has helped me kind of like understand that a little more over my career. I used to always want to like solve everything by myself. And you can, it's crazy in the CPG space too. Like I said it earlier, so many people are willing to help. So many people are willing to like just have a conversation. I mean, even you coming on the podcast, right? Hopefully this helps your brand, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like it's cool to make a connection and learn from people and understand like why you did the things you did. So I think it's a great takeaway for the listeners. You can always ask questions. Asking questions can help you kind of steer yourself in a different direction potentially.
I think like asking questions for me, and I'm still learning this, asking the right people, it like propels your evolution.
Mm-hmm.
As a founder or someone that is trying to develop something, like
Yeah.
there are so many people that have made so many of the mistakes that you've made. And I've actually found that it's vital for me to make sure that I reference people that have done it before, so that I don't have to create a trail that I have to clean up after.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
So many things that I've avoided by asking the right questions. And I don't think anybody really teaches us to ask questions, because it's like a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
And I still catch myself doing that, like with our financial model, just understanding cash flows. That's something I really need to become just very in the flow with, and just really understand that, because that's sort of the baseline of strategic decisions for the company too.
Sure. Oh yeah.
I started asking people, and then now everyone wants to help, and you're sort of like demystifying what something really is, because I think when you try to solve it on your own, you create like or at least me, I created like an internal struggle as if it's like this huge thing that I have to untangle and like really learn. And it
Yeah.
could be as simple as meeting somebody for an hour and them just explaining something to you, and you're like, oh, great. Like that
Yeah.
was really easy. So it eliminates the struggle too. And then you feel more confident when you do what you do and you don't waste your own time. So.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's great advice for everybody. So you guys, and then you launched on your own site, right? How was the launch? What was that like for people who have never, launched something out into the world before?
So our initial, and I think this comes from lack of just experience, our initial approach was direct to consumer, right? Like putting money behind ad spends. It didn't work out too well, to be
Okay.
honest with you. We were
Yeah.
spending way too much money for acquisitions, and we didn't know what messaging was going to work, and we're just finally learning that now. So like great traction. I mean, we did pretty good with sales the first month. Like 5K in sales for the first month, which is decent. I also brought on like a CMO who has worked with some huge food brands before. But I realized, not criticizing, but that was not the right thing to do as a startup that just has really lean budgets. He was used to like spending $10,000 on influencers. Meanwhile, we have like $300 to spend on influencers. So anyway, things went pretty well, but we ran out of money very quickly.
Okay.
We're planning to an extent.
Sure. Yeah. And you
And
don't know until you do it, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if it was necessarily poor planning. Yeah, it was the assumption that the ads like you really need to create a pipeline, and we're a new brand, right? We're creating awareness, and it takes time for people to speculate about what the brand is and then eventually make a purchase. And we didn't have any of those email flows or pathways set up to really bring people in. So we were bringing people to site, and I just quickly realized this is a waste of money, and we don't have it. So we need to pivot. So next month, we just really focused on doing retail sales. So just got out on the
And
streets.
that's a quick flip to retail. I mean, that's good for you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And we needed to do what we need to do to survive. Right. And we also need to focus on right now, like telling a good story. So we're slowly getting back into e-commerce right now, but I needed some data, and
Sure.
going online, like we wouldn't have had great results in terms of like reorders, but working with stores at this point. So we're in about 35 stores right now. And we're finally seeing the data that we need to approach like the next level of retailers
Awesome.
and distribution, et cetera.
Well, no, I mean, good for you guys. I mean, I think you're in the very early stages of getting getting distribution. So it's fun to talk to you now. I'm sure if we talk in a year from now, you guys will be at a
Oh yeah.
whole nother stage with tons of lessons learned. So,
Yeah.
congrats on the launch. First of all, it's, I don't think, again, a lot of the listeners, if you haven't gone through a process or worked at a brand, bringing a product to market, just in itself, just like a launch on Amazon, D2C, whatever it is, with packaging and food, like there's so much work that obviously you just explained went into that day. So congratulations on that. It's exciting. And hopefully we'll get some people checking it out.
Yeah.
So what's next as we we're, getting here towards the end of the hour? What's the next, I know maybe this might be a really hard question because you guys are young, but like the next 6 months, year, 2 years, what's your hopes for Umli, and where you guys go next?
Yeah. I think a big focus right now is focusing on planting seeds for different streams of revenue, right? So we're getting Amazon set up. We're doing a lot of corporate partnerships, trying to get into like HelloFresh and like all of these different these e-commerce vendors, and we're having luck with that. So it's like continuing to build the storyline, doing some sales, but we're moving away sales in terms of smaller retailers, but we're in our next step, which we're bringing on a broker or two, expanding our distribution, but doing it strategically.
Love
So
it.
like just focusing on the East Coast and the West Coast, and really putting the efforts behind it to make sure that the product moves. Focusing on establishing really relationships with the retailers and making sure that people get to know the product before we expand even more. A big thing that I've learned from a lot of founders, and I'm taking this into our plans for the next 6 months, is that it's easy to get into 200 or 300 stores. It's not easy to actually get the product to move. So really focusing on driving trial and the awareness. So growing slowly and steadily, but like predictably, right? Like as much as we can to alleviate risk. So we have a couple of distributors that we're going to start working with. And then again, resurfacing our direct to consumer site, which it's sort of hard to approach it because there's like this weird middle ground. You have to be there with quantities for you to actually start making money. So we might be working with a partner that will basically help us reduce our cost per acquisition, so that and then
nice.
focus on like building the funnel on our website. It's not great right now, and it's not optimized to really lead to purchases. So we're really just focusing on like tightening things up, and and then getting into a bunch of reviews in the summer, the end of the summer. So a lot of stores are doing their cookie reviews in August. So we should see getting into stores in November or January of next year.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great time to be there too. I feel like January, I know from my time at RX, that's a huge month for the better for you, brands, and obviously people trying to get healthier for the new year. So I'm sure that'd be a huge win for you guys with your cookies for sure.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, that's exciting, man. And obviously pumped to see your continued growth, especially in retail and online. Obviously, as we talked before, I'm a big e-commerce guy. So love to hear that you guys are really diving in there. I think you guys have an awesome website First of all, I'll just say that I really,
Really?
really liked your website. So yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I mean, not appreciate it. Sorry. I really, really liked it. And I was looking through it. I'm like, there's something that stands out to me that really feels like you guys are differentiated in the way you're coming to market. And so, wish you guys the best. Some of the last questions I love to ask every founder. I think it's really interesting to kind of get the same questions asked. The first one being source of knowledge for you. Like, do you have a favorite book, podcast, or just something in general source of knowledge that you'd like to share with the audience today?
Can we go to source of knowledge? What has really impacted me? There are just so many books. I'm reading a good book right now. It's called High Hanging Fruit.
Okay.
The founders of a coconut water brand.
Ooh, okay.
And I think what I'm taking away from that, and just a reaffirmation of before, which is why we're really focusing on our messaging, is our why. Right? Like, people buy why, it's not just what the product is. So, I mean, I started this whole brand because I had a horrible relationship with food. I had an eating disorder, and I think that's surfacing that. So it's that book, and then it's also this TEDx video by Brene Brown. I don't know if you've ever heard of her.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In a guiding force, power of vulnerability. Like, really using your story and your vulnerability, like where you came from and your history, showing that you're not showing all parts of you is so important. And I think that is what makes a brand relatable, when you're actually connecting to the story of the brand and not just the product. So those are the two books. We're really focusing on our why right now. Like, why are we doing what we're doing? Yeah, the product in itself is great. It's a gift to the world that we're actually providing something that nourishes you. But on the same token, like, how do we take that to the next step? Creating the best workplace environment, like making sure that our ingredients are sourced ethically. Like, we're paying fair wages for a certain ingredient, tiger nut, that comes from Africa. We need to focus on next, right? So things like that.
Love it. No, that's fantastic, man. That's really cool. I wrote those down and I will add those to the show notes for everyone to check out. The next one, this one is my favorite question, actually. What you as a founder, obviously, as you've already mentioned, there's a million different things going on. You're trying to keep track of a lot of different moving pieces. What do you use from a tool perspective to basically organize your life, get goals done, get daily tasks done? Are you a pen and paper kind of guy? Do you use apps? Whatever it is, what do you use to get shit done?
I use Google Keep, actually.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So Google Keep, and then I was using Asana, but now I'm starting to use Trello.
Okay.
Um,
I've
and it's
used
great
Trello a
for
little
that.
bit.
Yeah, you've used Trello before?
I've messed with it a little bit. Yeah. I
Yeah,
find that it's really nice. I might just not be using it correctly because sometimes I feel like I like lose. There's just a ton of stuff going on.
yeah.
But love to know why you like. Did you just like Trello for the user interface of it?
I like it because you can actually segment projects, and they're easy to see, visibly speaking. Like, they're all tasks on the project,
Yeah.
uh, and it's not overly complicated. Like, there aren't a bunch of like green flag, red flag. Like, for me, I used to focus so much on planning that I actually spent too much time managing my calendar and planning than actually just doing things. So really, to be able to just reference something, keeping that up to date, but quickly using it to progress, I just found that was a lot easier to approach.
Love it. Okay. Well, I love that. No, it's great. I think
What's your favorite?
my favorite, I use something called a full focus planner. I have gotten back into the pen and paper thing. It really, to explain the way it works, it's really simple. I'll add it to the show notes.
Yeah.
It's a planner where you have to put your goals in the very front. So it's like you have to write your 10 goals down or whatever main goals you have in a year, put which quarter it's due. So it's really simple. It's just like you have to write it out. And then each week you have what's called like a big three. So it's like, what are three things you have to get done this week that are building towards your goals, which to me helps me like take this like storm of a million things and what are like the three most important. And then you have a daily like spread where it's like, okay, today, Tuesday, what's my big three today? And then I have a bunch of other tasks below it. But like for me, it's like getting 3 things done a day, 21 things in a week I've used it for 3 quarters in a row, and I've gotten more done in the last 3 quarters than I've ever gotten done, I think. And I'm actually hitting goals.
Okay.
It sounds like a lot of work. It's super
No, it
simple. I'll
sounds
send it to
good.
you.
Yeah.
It's changed the way I've like set goals and got stuff done. But I do leverage things like Trello. I use Google Sheets a lot. I have a very organized Google Sheet with like everything I have to do. For me, it's like a one-stop place where I know just like all of my shit's there. And then I put it into my full focus planner, whether that's the most efficient
Got
thing.
it.
It's once a day. First thing in the morning, I have a cup of coffee and I like write out my stuff. And then I
Yeah,
work out and I come back and I'm just like going through it all day. So
that makes sense. You're like sifting through it.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's my process. But the last one and the most important question, Nick, is how do people follow along with you in your journey? And then most importantly, the brand, how do they get involved? How do they try these delicious cookies?
Um, we follow us on social media, obviously, but that's a big one.
Definitely. I'll link that.
Um, yeah, follow to add me on LinkedIn. I do a lot of updates and what I'm going through and like what I share a lot of what I'm learning too with everyone on LinkedIn. Where can you buy the cookies on our website for right now? And if anyone wants free shipping, you can order cookies, and the code is free to fly. You can
Love it.
add that,
Okay. Well, we will add that.
and we'll be on Amazon in a couple of weeks. We're mainly in the Northeast right now in terms of retailers, so online is the way to go. If that's an option, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
All right. Well, appreciate the time. I'll add all of that stuff to the show notes. Everyone can find it, and everyone's going to get to try some delicious new cookies. And thanks for the time, man. Appreciate it. This was
Yeah.
fun. Nice to get to know you, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, Shane. I'll talk to you.
Awesome.